Okay, this is part two of the Introduction to Animal Farm, and this time we're going to talk a little bit about the Russian Revolution. Animal Farm is an allegorical novel based on 20th century Russia and communism. You got to know a little bit about Russian history to understand the novel.
No! No!
Russian history is long and complicated. So I'm just going to try to tell you exactly what you need to know to understand the novel and respond. All right, we're going to start out with Tsar Nicholas II. He came to power in 1894, and Tsar Nicholas is represented in Animal Farm. In 1904 to 1905, Russia fought a war with Japan. The country didn't favor the war, and Russia got the tar kicked out of it during those 2 years. Because the war left the country in unfavorable conditions with long work days, hard factory work, food shortages, many of Russia's workers revolted. On one occasion, the workers went to the Tsar's palace with a petition and were met with gunfire by the guards. Some reports say 1,000 people were killed. This is known as Bloody Sunday and considered to be the start of the active revolution. Okay, now here we are at World War I. So the country is already in bad condition. Tsar Nicholas thought that Russia's participation in World War I would help Russian prestige after its embarrassing defeat by Japan in the 1905 war. But instead of bringing unity, the war did the opposite. So Nicholas went to the battle lines to fight with his soldiers to boost morale. The people were starving. Soldiers were sent to the front lines without guns, and the public blamed Tsar Nicholas. So he went to the battle lines, but that meant that while he was gone, the home front was in control of his wife, Alexandra, whom the Russians didn't trust. She was part German, and one of her aides, Rasputin, who's a whole story in and of itself, was hired to cure her son's hemophilia. And they were scrutinized by the public. These further issues with Nicholas's reign caused the public to revolt. So now we have the February Revolution. On February 27th, at least 200,000 workers were on strike, and soldiers even joined them. And Tsar Nicholas was asked to give up the throne, and a provisional government took over. On July 8th, a guy named Alexander Kerensky became leader of the provisional government, but he refused to get Russia out of World War I, which still upset the country because they were having a really hard time. On July 19th, Kerensky ordered the arrest of the Bolshevik Party. Now we're getting to the meat of the matter. Because they protested against the war, the Bolsheviks were essentially the Communist Party of Russia. So the Bolsheviks are communists.
I don't understand.
So here's a little bit more about communism. Now, we've already talked about how it's an economic and social system in which almost all property and resources are owned by a classless society and not by individual citizens. It's based on the Communist Manifesto written mostly by Karl Marx. Now, I want to point the date out to you about Karl Marx. His lifetime was 1818 to 1883. He was long dead by the time any of this happened. He simply wrote this set of ideals he had for society that he believed would work and make life better. So before you understand the Bolsheviks, though, you got to know a little bit about the influence of Karl Marx.
Hello.
Marx envisioned common ownership of all land and wealth by the people and the fading away of the power of government. In this society, social relationships were to be controlled on the fairest of all principles, which is from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. So everybody does what they can, but people don't consume too much. They only take what is needed so that others can have what they need. Differences between manual and intellectual labor and between rural and urban life were to disappear, which would open the way for unlimited human potential. And so this ideal doesn't sound like a bad thing. Where the problem comes in, though, is it's open to corruption, and we're going to talk more about that. So Marx is known as the father of communism, and people who follow his ideals are called Marxists. Marxism is pretty complicated, but here are some key ideas to keep in mind. He believed private ownership of land should be abolished. So everything belongs to everybody. All the land belongs to everybody. He believed in equal distribution of wealth, which is a classless society. No one is upper class, no one is lower class. Everybody's the same. And he believed in a communal life where everyone shares prosperity. Workers of the world unite. So those are the basic ideas of Marxism. Marx died before all this happened, but his ideas were realized by Vladimir Lenin. He was the leader of the Bolshevik Party that Kerensky had just arrested. And so this leads to the October Revolution. So here, Lenin led the Bolsheviks in this revolution to get rid of Kerensky. The Communist Party was behind him and his Marxist ideals. It's rumored that while in power, Lenin had the royal family killed. They were shot to death in a basement. And so this part is kind of the basis of the story of Anastasia, that possibly the Princess Anastasia survived. There's a lot of controversy about that. Okay, the Russian Civil War. After the Bolsheviks, now called the Communists or the Reds, took control, anti-communist enemies, the whites, fought within the country. The United States supported the white side and opposed communism. Now, just kind of as a side note here, the whites of the white side are not references to race. The red side and the white side are just nicknames. Now, ironically, in all this, the peasants suffered the most, and they were the ones who were supposed to benefit. To support the end of the war, which the Reds won, Lenin came up with the NEP, which is a new economic policy. And so peasant farmers were allowed to keep some of their food to sell for profit. Of course, they regulated sublime production, but this is a limited idea of capitalism. Also, he created a bank to industrialize Russia. What he was doing, though, was laying the foundation for full-on communism. He was preparing Russia for a predicted worldwide communist revolution. Lenin changes Russia's name to the USSR, so the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Now, Lenin died in 1924. And so the Communist Party needed a new leader. There were two contenders, Trotsky and Stalin. Now here, Marxists and Lenin are represented in Animal Farm, and so are Trotsky and Stalin. So a little bit about them. Trotsky was one of the leaders of the October Revolution. Like Lenin, he was a brilliant public speaker. He was a former leader of foreign affairs, and he favored world revolution like Lenin. Now, although Trotsky was not an angel for sure, he was a hero of the early revolution, and Orwell was somewhat of a fan. Now we have Stalin. He opposed Trotsky. He didn't exactly follow Marx. He played an administrative role during the October Revolution. He was not necessarily a great speaker, but he was a cold, calculating, brilliant strategist. He eventually gained control of the Communist Party in 1928 and replaced Lenin's plan with a 5-year plan of his own. And he believed in communism in one country. He wasn't worried about the world. He just wanted to control the USSR, Russia. So he deported Trotsky into permanent exile. You got to get rid of your enemy. He became a tyrant and an extreme nationalist. The only thing he claimed that mattered to him was Russia. His government seized private land to create collective farms. So notice here, this is not about cooperation. He seized the land. Many peasants refused to give up their land, so he used vicious military tactics against his own people. He rigged trials that led to executions of an estimated 20 million government officials and ordinary citizens, and his government controlled the flow and content of information to the people. And he all but outlawed churches. Now, for as horrible as Adolf Hitler was, there is a solid argument to be made that Joseph Stalin is in the same category. We're going to talk a little bit more about Stalin and all that as we go. But just to know, he was in power, though, from 1924 to 1953, a very, very long time. He died in 1953, though, and Animal Farm was first published in 1945. So Orwell was writing about this political situation and the situation with humanity and government while all of this was still going on. In the novel Animal Farm, animalism is really communism. And so Farmer Jones is Tsar Nicholas. Old Major represents Marx and Lenin. Snowball is Trotsky. And Napoleon is Stalin. Now, other characters represent even more than this. And we will talk about this all the time as we go along. So don't worry about it, but this is how it, right now, but this is how it is. So animalism equals communism, and here's some basic ideas of it. And remember, the basics of Marxism is pretty idealistic. So animalism is taught by Old Major and invented by Karl Marx, though, with communism. There's no rich and no poor, and a better life for workers. But the government owns everything in communism. All animals are equal in animalism, but all people are equal in communism. Everyone owns the farm, and the people own the government. So they're very similar ideas here. Okay, so that is the end of this brief overview of the Russian Revolution that you need to know for Animal Farm. So please complete the short assignment, Animal Farm Introduction, assignment number 2 in Google Classroom. This assignment is due Wednesday, April 8th, 2020. Please, if you have any questions or you need me at all, send me an email. Thanks.